For this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. Luke 7:47. Somebody want to do a couple?
For many years I served as a field and preacher. Since I was usually only there for one Sunday, I often refused my favorite sermon. One there was entitled Jesus, Friend of the Friendless. After a while, I noticed that others enjoyed the sermon as much as I did. I don't think that it was necessarily my presentation, but rather the subject that appealed to people. And the idea that Jesus cared about everyone, even friendless people, that touches each of us. In the Gospel, we find numerous examples of individuals who Jesus befriended. In John's Gospel, he seen, for example, the story of Samaria woman, John 4:1-38. Others include the blind man, Barnabas, and the man with leprosy that begged Jesus to be healed. Mark 10:46-52, and Mark 1:40-45. In this lesson, we will be looking at two others in Luke's account, both of them women who needed a friend like Jesus.
Somebody want to do two more paragraphs?
Once again, we see in this story a contrast between two individuals. The main characters, besides Jesus, were a woman known for her sinful life and a Pharisee who was no doubt known for his highly moral character. This Pharisee, whose name was Simon, had invited Jesus to his house for a meal. Why did he do this? Was it to get to know Jesus better and learn more about his teaching, or was it to find some fault with Jesus? We are not given any explanation, but the latter seems more likely considering Simon's treatment of Jesus. While they were eating, a woman came into the room. Although it seems a bit strange to us today, this was not unusual at the time. The houses were left open and people could come and go. It was actually sort of a status symbol for the neighbors to come in during the meal. It showed the importance of those present. Sometimes people would come into the house just to see who was there and hear what they were talking about.
Maybe you want to do two?
This was not just any woman, however. She was a woman who was known for her sinful life, possibly a prostitute. Jesus and the others were reclining at the meal, and a woman came up behind Jesus. She was weeping and washed his feet with her tears. Then she dried his feet with her hair, kissed them, and anointed Jesus' feet with an expensive perfumed oil. These were things that were just not done by a Jewish woman of the time, but she was oblivious to the opinion of others and was motivated by deep emotion. Meanwhile, Simon, and probably others as well, were shocked at the woman's actions and Jesus' failure to realize who she was. No one, especially a teacher, would have allowed this woman to speak or touch him. Her actions would have been very offensive to those present. We can almost imagine the gasping breaths and the whispered comments of the other guests as she began to wash Jesus' feet.
Jesus then did something unexpected. He told her a story. It was a parable about two people who owed money. One a great deal of money and the other much less. The moneylender in the story forgave the debts of each of them. Which one would love him more? Jesus asked Simon. He replied that the one who was forgiven most would love the most. Then Jesus let Simon have it. Simon had been rude and treated Jesus in a disrespectful manner. He had failed to show Jesus even the most common courtesy. No water to wash his feet, no kiss of greeting, no oil to anoint his head. This woman, whom the religious elite, like Simon, would have considered a defiled sinner, had lavished Jesus with her love. Simon had invited Jesus to the meal, but showed no kindness or even courtesy towards him. In contrast, the woman went far beyond the usual expression of hospitality. Somebody want to finish that one up?
This unnamed woman showed great love because she had been forgiven much. Simon, with his self-righteousness attitude, know that he was so good that he had very little to be forgiven. It would have been interesting to have been there to see the end of the meal. We can just imagine a disgruntled and humiliated Simon over to the side, whispering to his friend, shocked and dismayed. The other guests would slowly wander out, and then there would be Jesus standing by his woman, her face radiant with joy for the forgiveness that she had been granted and the friend that she had found.
Any thoughts about it?
Why did the people not like the woman?
Why? Because she was a prostitute. Oh, why did people not like women back then?
Yeah, like her.
Her, because she was a prostitute. She was a bad woman. And that's why the Jews would not do what Jesus is talking about. She was kept at arm's length.
Well, there's a lot of that goes on today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it did. It happens every day, all day. Sure does. Somebody want to do a couple more paragraphs.
Jesus heals a crippled woman, Luke 13:10-17. The sad story of this woman and the miracle that healed her is also unique to the Gospel of Luke. Imagine yourself humped over, unable to straighten up, and add to that the common belief that conditions like that are a punishment for sin. And you will begin to understand this woman's plight. It was a Sabbath, and Jesus was teaching in a synagogue. This woman, who had suffered for 18 years, was among those present. Usually a person came to Jesus or was brought to him to be healed. This time Jesus singled out the woman and called her to him. Reaching out, Jesus put his hands on the woman and healed her. In doing so, Jesus was confronting not only the woman's illness, but also the attitude of the religious leaders.
The problem was that Jesus healed the woman on the Sabbath. This was not the only time that Jesus was criticized for healing a person on the Sabbath. Luke recorded 3 other examples: Luke 4:31-41, 6:6-11, 14:1-6. The Jews were really proper about the Sabbath. They did not do anything on the Sabbath. As a matter of fact, they literally had so many steps they could take in a day. And today, if you go to Jerusalem, the elevators are turned on, so you can't go up and down. They was real careful about this Sabbath. They did not want to do anything. In fact, Jesus' death, they couldn't do anything for him after he died because it was at sundown on the Sabbath, coming up on the Sabbath. So at sundown, they had to be done. They couldn't do anything else. So they had to make sure he was in the tomb. That's why when the woman poured the perfume on him, he said, you don't really understand what she was doing, but what she was doing was preparing him for his death, because they wouldn't be able to anoint him as death because of the time. So the Sabbath was very, very, very important. Even to Jesus, the Sabbath was important.
Well, then they give examples of doing stuff on the Sabbath, like a cow or something, or the pond, or
He said, if you have a lamb stuck in the fence, are you not going to remove it? You're not going to save that lamb. The Jews would let him die, let that lamb die, but Jesus would. He said, you pull the lamb out. And that's what he said. You need to rescue somebody, rescue him. You need to do something for somebody. Because if you look around our country, we have doctors and nurses, and all these people work on the Sabbath. And if you were in the Jewish law, and which I don't know what the Jews do, I'm sure their hospitals are open on the Sabbath. In the old Jewish deal, they wouldn't. But it's interesting. Somebody want to do a couple more?
everyone presented should have been excited to see Jesus bring an end to this woman's suffering, but it was not the case. The synagogue ruler and perhaps others as well were indignant because they believed that Jesus had violated the Sabbath. The law did state that a person should not work on the Sabbath over the centuries. A complicated system of rules were added to define exactly that is work. The religious leaders felt that medical assistance was work and should not be given in emergency or when the person's life was in danger, because Pharisees even claimed that it was wrong to pray for a sick person on the Sabbath. Ignoring this, Jesus healed the woman before their eyes.
Let me back up. That on the Sabbath, what Jesus is talking about, God said, you know, on the Sabbath you're to hold it holy, and it's separated from the rest of the week. And that's what he meant. He said, your Sabbath should be a day that is nothing like what you do during the week. If you go to work all week on the Sabbath, you should. If you do whatever you're going to do, if you cook, clean, whatever, you shouldn't do it on the Sabbath. So that's what he's saying, but Jesus is saying, because then apparently they weren't allowed to help people who were sick.
Well, if somebody falls down sick on the Sabbath, you should help them.
Yeah, and that's what
Help
Jesus,
them die.
yeah, that's what Jesus is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that this is what all the laws that you've made and all the definitions you came up with are wrong. That's not what should happen. Okay, go ahead.
Instead of being happy for this woman or praising God for such a miracle, all that they could do was to criticize Jesus for breaking one of their petty rules. Jesus called them hypocrites, a strong word that he sometimes used to condemn. And actions of these who were opposed to God. His arguments were simple. If you can take care of your ox or your donkey on the Sabbath, why not then heal this poor woman on the Sabbath? Those who had criticized Jesus were humbling. Some versions translated the word as changed. Jesus had compassion on the woman and had healed her. A great miracle had been performed. Other present that day were overjoyed by the miracle and excited about the great things that Jesus was doing. Sadly, the religious leaders were unable to see this because they were blinded by their legality. How do you pronounce that?
Legalistic.
Is
Legalistic.
okay.
Mindset. Jesus taught large crowds, and that was certainly an important part of his ministry. More often in the Gospels, and Luke in particular, we see Jesus interacting with people one at a time. It was the kindness, compassion, and friendship that Jesus showed to these individuals that drew them to him. The same is true today. Most people become Christians through the influence of a friend or relative. Good teaching is still important, but it is personal relationships that most often bring someone to Jesus.
Today, do we know what was wrong with the woman?
She was crippled.
Yeah, she was. She was crippled, and one of the things that you'll notice is when Jesus does the healing, it's automatic. They're healed immediately. It's not. It's usually never, and they say the healings that Jesus has done would fill the world. The amount of healing he did while he was alive. But the ones that we see, that the writer sees, are things that are present. Like she was crippled, now she's not. The man was let down through the roof, he was crippled, and he walked away. The blind could see. All those that were physically able to see is what was recorded in the Bible. But there was many others that wasn't. One of the other ones that wasn't was the lady touched Jesus' garment. She had been bleeding for 16 years or something. And none of the doctors could fix her, and she touched Jesus' garment, she was good. So there was a lot of healing going on that we don't know about, and don't get the opportunity to see it or understand. But he did heal a lot. How did Simon's treatment of Jesus compare with that of Nicodemus? John 3:2. Somebody want to read John 3:2? John 3:2.
This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered him, Truly, truly, I say unto you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God.
How did Simon's treatment of Jesus compare with that in this room?
well, slightly different circumstances, but Nicodemus was a bit more respectful.
Yeah, Nicodemus was a lot more respectful, and he showed who he was and gave him the authority he deserved. Somebody want to retell the parable of the two debtors in their own words? It's a good one for you, Nate.
Two debtors.
Retell.
Well, in my own words was that the one owed the other debtor money, and the debtor, the first debtor, he owed money, but he was forgiven his debt.
No, that's wrong story.
Uh,
Yeah, these two debtors, Jesus is just making a parable. He said that the one that owes much and the one that owes little.
They loved differently.
Um,
The one who owed much, when forgiven, is going to be more grateful than the one who owed very little.
yeah, the one that owes the most will be forgiven the most, and the one that owes little, because he was talking about Simon. That Simon he didn't owe it. He thought he didn't owe it as much to Jesus, so he didn't treat Jesus with the same respect this woman did, because she owed Jesus a lot because she was a prostitute. See what I'm saying? She was in debt a lot to God because she had sinned much, and Simon, of course, thought he was better than her.
Yeah, but if Jesus forgives you much because you have sinned much,
Yep.
and he forgives you little because you have sinned little, he's still covered both of their sins.
Right, but he's talking about the amount of love the person is going to have for him.
That's how much you're
Because
going to
forgiven.
That's how much you're going to respond back to Jesus.
Yeah, you're going to be
It's
more
not
appreciative.
It's not Jesus' response, it's the response Jesus gives back to what he does. So say a drunkard in the bar gets Jesus, and then you get somebody off the street that's basically a decent person and doesn't do much. The one in the bar is going to love Jesus a lot more because he's pulled him out of there, and he no longer is in that lie.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because Jesus forgave him much, so he'll love him much.
That goes along with that scripture. The more you're sunk into the murky waters, the higher he will lift you up,
Yeah,
out.
yeah, get you out.
Yeah.
That was David.
Huh?
That was David.
Yeah, that was
He
it.
looked at it.
Okay. Yeah.
And I love the story about, I don't know if y'all remember the story of David, but David prays to God, and God comes back and explains to David, I'm going to put your foot on the rock. And back then, they would dig for wells. They would dig, and there'd be holes everywhere. And you were talking about the murk and the mud. People walking across the desert at night wouldn't see them holes, they just fall off, didn't they? And so, in the bottom of the pit would be mud, and they just simply mud, and they couldn't get back out. And so God was telling David, I will put your foot on the rock so you can come out. But it was symbolism, it wasn't. David really didn't fall in, it was just pure symbolism. But David knew what he was talking about because that was part of the culture at that time.
You should have a flashlight.
Yeah, that would have been helpful. But he, in reality, was talking about Jesus, is what God was talking about. I'm going to put your foot on the rock, and then you can climb out. So there's a part where Jesus saves us, but all God can do is put a foot on Jesus, and we have to lift ourselves out. It's not going to be all Jesus. You got to do it yourself. You got to work. You got to make yourself better. You got to stay away from bars. You got to do better in your life. Because if you don't, You had the opportunity. Any questions? I know you're thinking about something. What? What?
I was just thinking about that song, Sinking Sand.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that song.
Yeah. Yeah, you build your house on, there's millions of songs related to that. You build your house on rock. The story is just like David, he said there, just like Jesus said, you know, you build your house on me, where it's not going to blow away. And that's what he's talking about. Build your house there. And if you build it on sand, the first strong wind comes, it's gone. It's going to blow away. Or the first water.
Also, I was thinking about David, when you were talking about that. David's an interesting character because he did so many different things, good and bad, but yet God said, he has my heart. And that's sometimes can be confusing because David's,
God said he's a man of my own heart.
yeah, and see, he sent Bathsheba's husband to the front lines to be killed. And he did a lot of bad things.
You can have a good heart and still do bad things.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting you say that. Make mistakes, you mean?
Made mistakes?
Yeah.
No,
It was
not
a
made
mistake.
mistakes.
David made a mistake in doing that.
No, that wasn't a mistake, that was intentional.
David had an affair with Bathsheba.
That was intentional.
But that was a mistake.
That wasn't a mistake.
Cost him his son.
That wasn't a mistake. People confuse mistakes with repetition, doing things over and over and over again. That in itself is wrong, to continue doing something wrong. It's just like Jesus, whenever they was going to stone the prostitute, Jesus walks over to her after they all leave. What did he say? Go and sin no more. He doesn't expect you to stay in the murder. He'll give you a rock to get out of it. And if you're not smart enough to get out of it with that rock, with Jesus, then there's nothing you can do.
Well, she couldn't go and sin no more because she lived in this world. She was going to sin, but not the same sin.
There you go. She's not going to do the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
And that's what we do today. That's what Jesus don't want us to do, is to continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over and get back to the same places you were. Because if you do, I think Jesus calls you what is that word?
Idiot.
Well, no, but it's pretty much the same thing. You know, he said you can't continue down the same path and expect the same, they're expected.
It's called insanity.
Yeah, but not he called it something else, it's a lot worse, but anyway, we can't call somebody that, but Jesus did. Because he had
A
power.
fool.
A fool, yeah. He said a fool, or in Job says that a fool does the same thing over and over and expects a different result. And that's what Jesus is saying today. You don't continue to sin. I've saved you. I've put your foot on the rock. Now it's up to you where you're going to go with it.
Well, a lot of people out in the world that make mistakes aren't saved. They haven't been Christians either.
But, you know, sadly, that's their fault. They have not won everywhere. Because when Jesus died, God put Jesus in our heart. And that was everybody. That was not just the Christians. That was everybody in this world has Jesus in their heart. Now, what they do with that is their choice. And that's why we have free will. It's our choice to make those decisions. Now, we can either make them right, wrong, or indifferent. God has let people die for doing those things. I didn't know that either.
Sure.
And God Jesus out of their heart and let them go on to sin. And that's what's happening in the world, and that's part of my sermon today. That's part of what's going on in the world today. You see people turning, and they're saying good is evil and evil is good. You know, I mean, they say abortion is nothing more than a medical procedure, and that's taking a life. So we're slowly moving them, well, not anymore, we're kind of on fast track now, we're moving away from God at an alarming pace. The more we see it, and you know, you have people that say, I want to be a Christian, but they don't want to put the work in. I want to be a better person, but they don't want to put the work in. I want to do these things, but they don't want to put the work in. And that's what's happening in the world today. And it says that's what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And unless you put the work in, you're in trouble.
What work are you talking about?
Become a Christian.
And you're working.
A lot of people want to be Christians, they don't want to go to church. A lot of people don't want to believe the Bible, they only want to believe a portion of it, a portion that helps them. People will
Many
use
people that watched TV on Sunday, pastors, and said, you know,
That was
"Go to
good
church,
enough."
but we do it, we watch a sermon on TV.
but that's not fellowship. And I'm going to read a verse today that says that is a must. And that's what I'm saying. You don't want to put the work in for God. You don't want to, you've got so many Christians up there today that says I'm a Christian. But then Monday through Saturday, they're out doing whatever they want to do.
You know who Robert Schuller is?
Yeah.
He has a church in California where you pull up to a speaker, like if you're in the drive-in, and you watch him on a big screen and put the speaker in your window, and there you go. That's church, and they call it church.
Well, people have pulled away from what church really is. That's worshiping God. That's part of the things that we do for God. That's why we come to church. We come to church on Sunday to worship God and be with God. Now, whether people want to realize it or not, when we shut those doors to the sanctuary and we have church, God is in this room.
But we come to praise him
Yeah,
and be thankful, worship him. That's why we're here.
yeah. And you can't do that in front of City Car. You can't sing songs. And it says sing songs, do this, do that. You don't do it. You know. So if things in the world are more important than coming to church and doing the things you need to do, you're not putting work.
Well, people of today found a way that they think, the easy way, so they don't have to put any work
And that's why the world's going to crash.
into it. Yeah.
Is because they don't want to put the work in. They don't want to show up at church. They don't want to be part of the church. They don't want to worship God. They don't want to make things better. And that's what God says we must do. Which is said, over and over in the Bible, Paul, Matthew, Mark, Luke, all of them, that was a big part of their week, was worship. And when we failed to worship, it was like the story I told. This guy hadn't been in church for several weeks. And the pastor goes over to his house after the third week. He knocks on the door and the house has come in. They go, this was back long, many years ago. They come in and they set him, takes him back to the parlor above the fireplace because it was cold out. And they sat down, neither one of them said a word. And the preacher sees a poker. And he reaches up and gets that poker and he takes one of the bright, pretty red embers and he slides it over to the side. Well, they sat there a few minutes and that bright, really pretty red ember turns black. Well, he reaches over with the poker and he pushes it back over to the fire and all of a sudden after a few minutes it's right on. The pastor said, well, I think I need to go. And And he said, you know, Pastor, that is the best sermon I've ever heard. That's what happens when you don't go to church. You lose that desire. You lose that will. You know, and we're all brothers and sisters, and you lose that communication. You know, and you get where you don't want to spend time with your family, and that's what happens. You don't want to spend time with your church family.
Well, that's like, Dad already used to walk 2 miles a day. And winter time, it's too cold to get out and walk, so whenever you get back in, walk.
Yeah, you fall out of it just a little bit. And, you know, it's sad, but we have so many people out there, they know of the Christian faith, but they don't know how to do it. Or they don't have the desire to do it. And that's what's going on. That's what, when you hear the word great falling away, that's what it is. But I ain't gonna get too deep into that, because I can make a lot. But anyway, what was Simon's attitude? How did he see this woman? His sinner is a sinner. How did Jesus' attitude differ from Simon's? Jesus saw her as someone he wanted to save.
Well, Simon thought she was beneath him.
Yeah. One last thing, and then we'll close. Do y'all know how Jesus healed people?
Killed people.
Healed.
Oh. I've never have heard, but I think he would, went to his father.
The way Jesus would heal people, he would put their hand on them, and he would say, you are forgiven. He didn't say, get up and walk and all of them. He would put his hand on them, and he would say, you are forgiven. Because the Pharisee said, you can't forgive people. And he said, was it easier for me to say you're forgiven or get up and walk? So many times Jesus would just say, you are forgiven. Yeah, and they were healed. Anthony, you want to close?